jam you don't spread.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Radio FreakJam. It's Monday, and we're here with the Meet the Freaks with Mr. Dr. Simon Maslin. How you doing,
Hello.
Simon?
I am fine. How are you?
Not bad. It's Monday, start of the week. You know how it goes. You've got your YouTube running, haven't you?
I have. Shall I turn it off? That'd be a good plan. Yes.
Mute that. There we go.
That's gone. That's good. I now can no longer see all the vile and vitriol being posted in the comments board. So that's
You can keep the comments up. Nah. Just mute the video. That's all you need to do.
I spent an entire session just staring at it, going, "Please love me." Yeah, it's just a bad thing to do, really. So anyway, yes, I'm here. Hello, Monday night.
So what's going on? Are you working at the moment?
I am busy. Yeah. I'm really busy. Actually, this is. I've been the last week. I've done Zoom presentation. I've done a national press conference at the British Museum. I've done a presentation for the Christmas session of the Society of Antiquaries, and now I'm doing Radio FreakJam. So hat trick basically.
Which one's the coolest?
Oh, this obviously. I mean, national press attention is so passé. But yeah, last week there's a whole bunch of stuff in the press about people finding things in their gardens during lockdown and all that sort of. Then the annual launch of the Portable Antiquity Scheme report, which is the thing I was promoting, and that was sort of from me and my organisation last Wednesday. So doing that.
So we've come to know you as a musician on Radio FreakJam. You've appeared on the show a couple of times and done some folky metal.
Folky metal, this is it.
I think that's a fair way of saying it.
Absolutely.
And but your real job is an archaeologist.
This is it. I'm an archaeologist. I'm the my job title, as I mentioned last time, which is a bit. I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to people, to be fair. I'm Fines Liaison Officer for Hampshire and Surrey, which basically means I'm employed by the British Museum to liaise with people who find things, archaeological objects, objects of ancient, and mysterious, and exciting nature that I can identify for them and help record. So obviously, if you're out and about with a metal detector or walking a dog or just wandering through the countryside and you trip over a flint hand axe or a hoard of treasure, these items are things that are part of our heritage and they have importance and they need to be recorded. And I'm the person who records them. So I find out where they were found, I find out what they are, and I make records on the national database that's run by the British Museum as part of a thing called the Portable Antiquities Scheme. And a portable antiquity is something ancient that you can carry, essentially, as opposed to like a wall or a megalith or something. So it's also we're talking.
What is the rules for this? Because I know if I go to a field with a metal detector and I find something that could be of value, I have to turn it in by law, right?
Well, actually, the laws detecting this country are really quite lax compared to most other countries. Essentially, all you need is to have permission on private land to go metal detecting. Anything you find would belong to the landowner. There's no such thing as finders keepers. So it's the basic principle of common law in this country is that anything you find belongs to the person upon whose land it is found. There are some exceptions to this. The Treasure Act, which is the thing that I administer for HM Coroner's Court, basically is the thing which governs gold and silver and precious metal items. So if you find a coin hoard, that's not something which belongs to you. That, in the first instance, belongs to the Crown, belongs to the Queen. And the process of treasure is one which essentially establishes whether any museums would wish to and can acquire it. And if they can, they get first dibs, and it goes to them, and the finder gets a nice big fat financial reward equivalent to the value of the thing. So essentially it's a law which allows really important precious metal archaeological finds to be put into museums, and the people who find them to get money. So everyone's happy, everyone's a winner. And I administer this, and I advise people on the things they find and what they find and what to do with them. But essentially, the idea is that anything ancient in the landscape is part of our heritage. Archaeologically speaking, it's kind of background noise. It's the thing that happens when people move through the landscape. Things fall off their horses, they fall off their belts, or they drop coins, or they sort of move around, and it's just bits of history that end up in the landscape. And what we're doing is trying to make sure that we have records of that, so we can put it into the archaeological record and increase our understanding.
So come on then, the obvious questions. What's the funniest thing that you've been presented with?
Wow, funniest thing. I mean, to be honest, there's a really big internet thing at the moment. It's mostly an American thing. It's a sort of a whole online thing about portable rock art, which is this idea that stones are carved by prehistoric peoples to look like things like Neanderthals or deer or bison or whatever. And normally it's flint nodules that are sort of funny shapes, because flint is a funny mineral. It forms in voids in chalk that are fossils, and so it takes all sorts of weird and wonderful shapes. And people find these things, and go, oh my god, that looks a bit like a cow or something. And so there is this very pernicious internet idea that things like this are carved by people as opposed to natural objects. So we get an awful lot of weird shaped stones presented to us, and people claim they're all sorts of exciting things, but actually they're just stones. And I think that, to be fair,
Look,
look,
I've got one. I've got this. Look.
Yeah, sponge fossil. Just saying. 65
No, it's an
million
egg.
years old,
It's a
an
fossilised egg
dragon egg.
of a velociraptor. No, velociraptor.
I don't remember. Velociraptors are quite big, actually. So
Okay, maybe.
Yeah. But it's actually we get. I mean, the best will in the world. You get lots of exciting people who turn up with things, and they're really keen. They really want to understand what it is, and you do have to sort of say, well, actually, it's not quite what you're after, but it's still an interesting thing. So we get all sorts of odds and ends, really. That's one of the other.
What's the oldest thing that you've been presented
Well,
with?
the oldest sort of thing I got on here, actually. This is an example of the kind of oldest thing you'd expect to find in Britain. Right, here's a bit of show and tell. This is a
Other way, that's it. There you
other
go.
way. There we go. A Paleolithic biface or hand axe. Okay, and it's a stone that's been knapped, and you can tell it's been knapped because of the lenticular cross section and the fact it's been worked on both sides. Date range of this is 150 to 500,000 years old. So that is pretty much the oldest human-made artifact you are going to find in this country. And
How
they
old?
were a bit. It's up to 500,000 years old. It
Wow.
depends on where you find it, because those things, they wash out of glacial gravels and they end up all over South and East England. But to date them, you have to know precisely where they were dropped, which is pretty difficult because of the Holocene and stuff.
So 500,000 years old, we're
yeah.
talking before Homo sapiens. Us.
We are talking Homo heidelbergensis, we are talking pre-anatomically modern humans, we're talking people who weren't actually what we'd understand as modern humans making those things, yeah. Really exciting, because you can find those things. Actually, interestingly, Hampshire, you have the second highest number of those things being found anywhere in the country. There's a whole bunch of them. They're down the Solent, you get lots of these things, and they're really, really ancient and really fabulously interesting. So,
and these, the people back then, they were making tool kits. They didn't just have one tool for everything. They had tools for napping,
well,
they
actually,
had tools for scrapping.
Going back Paleolithic times, that you do have this idea of a single tool that does everything. I mean, in the Acheulean industry, where that comes from, bifacial tools are general purpose cutting and chopping and hunting and slashing and smashing tools. I mean, they're used for all sorts of things. It's only later you get more sophistication, diversification toolkits into all sorts of things like blades and spears and arrows and so forth. That's a sort of a later development of a Paleolithic sort of thing.
So 500,000 years old, the oldest you'll find in this country, you reckon?
Yeah, actually, if you go up to Norfolk, the Norfolk coast, places like Haysbury, you can get stuff that goes back 800,000 plus. Really, really incredibly ancient deposits up there, but not in this part of the world. No, a little bit later.
So, is this something you've done? Do you go out and metal detect?
No, I don't. I mean, my background is I'm an archaeologist, so I study archaeology for a long time. I've worked in all different kinds of archaeology, environmental archaeology, geoarchaeology, all the sort of scientific bits and pieces. But archaeology is essentially a multi-proxy discipline. It's all different techniques adding to the amount of information we know about stuff. So finds, objects, are one type of information. But there's all sorts of other kinds of information you can get from the geophysics of the landscape, the terrain, the sediments, all the organic remains. They're all adding to the picture. So when you go out with a metal detector, you find some amazing things, but it's one part of the story. So the background I come from is the more holistic, sort of all-encompassing side of things. So no, I don't personally go out and metal detector much myself.
Do you do digs yourself? Have you been on proper digs?
Yeah. I used to do digs all the time. I have only done one this year because of my job is not really something that has a lot of time to do for a lot of field archaeology. But I've done a lot of digs over. I've been digging since about 1994 in various places.
Where's the coolest place you've dug then?
Coolest place I've dug? Wow. I mean, the site I did my PhD on in Kent, which is a place with the unassuming name of Linnenge, down near Folkestone, was a royal palace site owned by a guy called Athelbert of Kent. And Athelbert was the king of Kent who invited St. Augustine over in 597, who was the guy who converted the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity. So right at the start of the conversion period when the Anglo-Saxons went from being pagan to Christian, the sort of start of the medieval period in this country to a large extent, he was there at ground zero, and it's a really culturally very interesting place.
So what sort of stuff were you finding there? Coins? weapons?
Well, to be honest, it's a big drinking hall. So I think the I don't know if you're familiar with Beowulf. The
Yes.
drinking hall, Heorot, the huge, massive hall where they'll get drunk and sing songs about dragons and so forth. It was one of those. It was a big Anglo-Saxon feasting hall where they all got together, all the thanes, all the upper class, and all the important people of the land got together and got massively smashed and talked about legends and myths and dragons. And we dug up one of those, basically.
So it's a bit like the FreakJam on a Thursday night, but in person.
Yeah, exactly the same, but with more kind of glass cone beakers and swords, I think.
So you haven't sort of made it out. So, I mean, obviously, when a lot of people think archaeology, we think Indiana Jones, we think Lara Croft. You haven't sort of made it out to sort of anywhere like Egypt or South America, where a lot of the really big archaeology is going on.
Well, it's really big archaeology. I mean, it depends what you're interested in archaeology.
Famous is probably a better way of putting it.
Famous archaeology, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, not so much, no. I mean, my focus has always been British stuff. I have dug in Denmark. I've done Viking sites in Denmark, which is
awesome.
Quite exotic. But no, I'm sort of more focused on local stuff because in this country there is just such a colossal amount of archaeology absolutely everywhere. And the purpose of my job essentially is to make people aware of it and help them understand it. And people find things in their gardens all the time. They find things walking their dogs, and just to contextualise it and saying, oh, it's a bit of a crappy potsherd, saying, well, this actually represents this exciting thing in archaeology, and you can sort of talk about it to them, and it sort of increases the value of people's local areas and their heritage. Really, it's not just about huge pyramids and tombs and running around with a whip and a pistol. I mean, I do that as well, but that's on the off day.
Just at weekends.
That's just a weekend.
Have you got the trilby?
I haven't got. No, I actually do have a bush hat which I used to wear on digs, like an Australian proper bush hat, which was my dig hat for many years. But I haven't got it in my office, so I can't put it on now, unfortunately.
So I did see. I think I saw Richard Carr in the chat room. Is he in there? Have I missed him? No, he is in there. Richard's in the chat room, and Richard is one of the Moose Men who come and play on the jam night.
All right.
And they actually play. I can't remember the guy's name again, but the guy with the hat from Time Team, the Western.
Well,
guy.
Phil Harding.
Phil Harding, yes. He actually plays in a jam night they go to somewhere distant. Let me know where it is, Rich. I can't remember. We had this
Fantastic.
chat. So, were you into Time Team as a boy?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the people who work on Time Team still work with me in this scheme. The organisation I work with, the Norfolk FLO, as a fire liaison officer, who's my equivalent in Norfolk, is Helen Geek, who was on Time Team. And apparently they are going back to do some stuff on YouTube, so it is still very much a brand that has yet to be reborn, so it's still going on.
With Baldrick?
Not necessarily with Baldrick, no, but the archaeologists who are involved in Time Team are still all very much involved in archaeology.
But you need Baldrick.
Yeah, he's the friendly face of popular archaeology, absolutely. His value was trying to communicate some of the rather dry concepts that archaeologists deal with, like potsherd typologies, to general public, actually making it accessible. And that's really, really critical for what we do, is communication and outreach to public understanding. So it's kind of what I'm doing here right now, trying to explain what it is I do.
I think, as you and I had a chat in the week, and I was going over the bits that I'm interested in. We'll talk a bit about those a bit later on. But I think, there is masses of stuff that we don't know as a culture, as a race.
Absolutely.
That we rely on people like you to try and fill some of the, join some of the dots. Because
absolutely.
Even what you do to a point is speculation. You work with the information you've got and try and fit it into this big puzzle.
There's an awful lot of received wisdom. There's an awful lot of things we say, oh, this is one of those because someone else said it was one of those. And actually that doesn't get questioned and that gets passed. It's a bit of a problem in, not just archaeology, but in science in general, but in archaeology is a particular issue where you do have people not questioning assumptions that have been made. And part of our job is to bring new facts to the table to try and change interpretations and make sure that what we've got is reflecting most accurately the truth as far as we know it.
And do you find that with the invention of new technologies, especially within the past 40, 50 years, that there's been a massive paradigm shift, that you can prove some of these older assumptions wrong, and we can find out more information?
Yeah, there are all sorts of really interesting things going on. One of the the key things in the field that I used to be more involved with than I am now, but early medieval archaeology, so Anglo-Saxons, essentially. There was this idea that Anglo-Saxons waltzed in, conquered all the ancient Brits after the Romans left, and it's very much a kind of one population moves in, the other population gets massacred, blah, 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 blah. Modern studies on things like archaeogenetics and isotope analysis, there's lots of really interesting scientific stuff that gets done looking at populations from the sort of the geochemical and biochemical basis of where they are and what they're doing. And it demonstrates there's a huge amount of continuity. And actually what you've got is the culture changes, the boss changes, the people don't. They're the same people. It's just a case of meet the new boss, same as the old boss, And so you get one chieftain coming in and replacing another one, and the people who are at the bottom of the heap doing their thing, growing their crops, getting on with life, just the same people over the centuries. And that's something in the last few years and decades that's really become very apparent and replaced earlier ideas of migrations and people moving around the country and bringing their pots with them, which is what Victorian archaeology was all about.
And obviously, with genetics and stuff like that, we can now look back into the distant past and see that, you and I probably somewhere have some Neanderthal genes. And people over in Asia have Denisovan genes, and there's this real picture appearing that it used to be a bit Lord of the Rings, where there was humans and other humanoid races running around doing their thing.
It turns out we got jiggy with Neanderthals about 30,000 BC. It was all happening. So there's a lot of continuity and crossover, and it makes a nonsense of any concepts of race, because if you start looking at genetic diversity, you find that pretty much everyone in the world is more closely related than groups of people in East Africa who live 100 miles apart, because that's the way diversification in genetics works. It's all about your bottlenecks and where you start from in your population, as opposed to long periods of diversification which pull things apart. So we are a lot more closely related than people think.
Did you see the article a few weeks ago about the guy? He was a teacher up down in Cheddar. Near Cheddar Gorge, and he worked at a school about 6 miles away from Cheddar Gorge. And genetically, they found he traced back to Cheddar Man, which is one of the earliest samples of man we have in this country.
Cheddar Man is the earliest post-Holocene arrival in this country. It's the earliest human remains that we have, as far as I'm aware, that postdates the end of the last ice age. So it's always taken as being like this is the very, very first Britain. But actually, mathematically, it's a bit of a nonsense, because the way mathematics works, if you think about every generation back you go, you double the number of ancestors you have. But everyone's doing that. So you go back a few thousand years, and essentially every single person alive today is descended from people alive at that point. So it's that everybody is descended from Cheddar Man. It's not just that the guy in the village was descended from him. Pretty much everybody in the country is. Because he's an ancestor at a distance sufficient that all the surviving ancestors are now represented in the population, which means that everybody in the population is a surviving descendant of him. The maths is absolutely mind blowing, but it really comes down to the fact that we are all very fundamentally interconnected in the way people don't really understand.
Yeah. I mean, you can imagine all them sort of people back in the day going, all those beaker people coming over here with their
flipping beakers, and their copper alloy daggers and fancy wrist guards, and getting buried near Stonehenge and upsetting the A303. I mean, what's that about, honestly?
And that was the other thing with Stonehenge. They're finding that some of the bodies buried there have got Middle Eastern and Asian origins potentially.
Yeah, he's talking about the Amesbury Archer, which is the beaker period. It's sort of early Bronze Age dude who was buried down the road at Amesbury, and he's from abroad. A lot of the high status burials that we do find do have foreign connections, because society was quite mobile at the time, and the channel isn't really big. It's 23 miles, so you can hop on a boat, you can get across it, and people were much more fluid in their movements than is currently assumed. Especially the sort of the top end of the tier, the high status people, they move between tribes and peoples and regions in the same way they did in the medieval period.
Fantastic. Right, let's have some music. You've sent me over a couple of tracks.
I sent you some tracks from my old band from back in the day. So see, think of that.
So this is Burning Blue. Tell us a quick bit about Burning Blue.
Yeah, Burning Blue was the old band I was in half a lifetime ago now. Oh my God. Beginning of the millennium, we were guys who got to Fleet in Hampshire, and we had a band, and we got together in about 2000, and we had like sort of a couple of years of just doing demos and playing gigs and doing stuff locally, having a laugh, and it was really good. And we sort of I'm not entirely sure how you describe our stuff really. We all had different approaches. It was sort of guitar rock of the time, with a bit of punk, with a bit of all sorts of bits and pieces really. So it's good fun.
Right, well, I've learnt religion.
Of my
TV,
which is always a bit of a classic for our sets.
Right, well, let's have a listen to this. We'll come and talk a bit more music, and we will be going back onto the history because I love it.
Absolutely.
So this is Burning Blue with I Learned Religion Off of My TV. Enjoy.
Well, I was born on a subway train, got a motorway mentality in my brain. I drunk so much that I couldn't see, and I left religion off of my TV. I grew up tall, I grew too fast. I learned about life, never made to last. Trapped deep in suburbia, never got free till I left a religion off of my TV. I run with the losers, I run with the scum. I'm a real no-hoper, a junk culture bum. I found out one day what it all meant to me when I left religion off of my TV. I wanna go to school, I wanna learn class, I wanna turn out right, I want to win to pass. I wanna be Buddha, I wanna learn Tai Chi, since I left a religion off of my TV.
There we have it. I learned religion off of my TV by Burning Blue. So I've had you digging through the archives of your musical history.
Demos from my old band from many years ago. Absolutely. A couple of absolute belters in there.
Belters.
Absolute belters.
You're a guitarist and you sing a bit.
Some have accused me of that. Yes, I have been accused of being a guitarist. Good God, the horror. Yeah, I'm a sort of folky guitarist. I've got a Maslin acoustic and I absolutely love it. And I sort of finger pick that. And I've got a whole bunch of guitars in my house. I've got about eight or nine of them now. But acoustic guitar is where I landed up, really. You know, it's just I like doing it. It's very much in the sort of the traditional folk idiom, but a massive fan of hardcore punk and metal at the time. So straddling a really awkward cultural divide. To be quite honest.
Thus, you must be a Frank Turner fan.
I am a bit of a Frank Turner fan, yes. I do admire the man Frank Turner, yes.
And is this how you know Mr. Phil Reese?
No, I went to school with Phil. He was a couple of years below me at school. We knocked about the same crowd of reprobates. I've known him for a long time.
You bullied him, basically, is what you're saying.
No, I bullied Phil. Honestly, he's the dominant personality in this relationship. What are you talking about? Christ. No, I've known him for a long time. He just like me, he washed up in Farnborough, just hasn't left. So, how I know a lot of people in this area, just apathy, really. You just stay here, really.
And is the love of music you have something that you and Phil sort of grew up with together, or is
I guess so. We've been to a lot of gigs. He's my gig buddy. Been to a lot of gigs in the last couple of years. Bands like Therapy and stuff. I went to see the Wild Hearts last year, which was one of the last decent gigs I went to before lockdown locked gigs out of the equation. I'm still a theoretical guitarist in his theoretical band. So Phil Reese and the Broken Ones. I am a lead guitarist of the Broken Ones. Should they ever be a thing?
I've never heard about this before.
This is it. He's kept that on download. Probably maybe he's forgotten about it, but it was a thing at least at one point.
The time you've had over lockdown, why has this
Phil
not been
Reese
a
the Broken
thing?
Ones. I am the broken one. Token broken one. There is no other broken ones as far as I'm aware yet. Unless he's managed to recruit a rhythm section. This was the last time I checked.
Are you drinking, by the way?
Am I drinking? Let's have a look.
Hey, cheers, sir.
Let's hope I don't play too
Cha-ching.
much. Otherwise,
And cheers
cha-ching.
to everyone out the chat room as well.
Yeah, a bit of Black Label there.
I'm on the Kraken.
Oh, lovely. Fancy pants rum.
Yes.
Very nice.
It is rather nice, to be honest.
It is rather nice. Absolutely, yeah.
Phil said to ask you about University Challenge.
Oh yeah. Oh God. Yes, I was on that, wasn't I? Yes, I was. I was team captain at Downing College, Cambridge, 1998 University Challenge season.
And did you win?
No. It was no. Well, no. We almost did. There were some rounds on cricket and classical music, and there's two things in the world I know nothing about. It's cricket and classical music. Although rock fans, the very first question I answered on University Challenge was about Deep Purple, and that makes me feel proud because I knew some classic rock, and that was what I spouted to Paxman in your face, Paxman. I know about Deep Purple. No, we didn't win because we were a bunch of reprobates from who didn't even win our local bar quiz, and we just kind of got through by more or less taking the piss all the way through, actually. Because University Challenge is one of the things people take really, really, really seriously. And the people who produce it like to have teams on who aren't taking it really, really seriously because otherwise it's just awful. So we kind of got through by knowing enough to get through and being a little bit more fun than some of the other teams.
Was it a bit like the young ones?
Do you know what? It actually a bit was because I really wasn't taking it seriously, and I didn't like Paxman. He didn't like me. We had a massive falling out, and it was just oh my god, it was horrendous. So yes, I did do that. Didn't get through past the first round, unfortunately. Lost to Glasgow.
Well, you've been on telly on a University Challenge.
Yeah, I was on a few times actually. I'm not really a fan of being on telly, to be honest. I feel really uncomfortable and awkward. And one of the things about my job is that we do get approached quite a lot by people trying to do TV programs about archaeology because there's a lot of us and we're sort of friendly face of archaeology, and it's just I don't know.
So what else have you done?
I did a game show on Channel 5 called Win Beadle's Money with Jeremy Beadle, the legendary Jeremy Beadle, who was a fabulous guy. Actually, he was a really nice bloke. And it was one of these sort of ghastly things where you'd sort of answer questions and try and win money, and I was useless. Largely because they didn't ask me questions on anything I knew about, like I don't know, particle physics or history or something. It was all sort of TV and soap operas and so no, I didn't do anything.
You're into particle physics as well.
Well, it's as a general subject that people know a lot about, particle physics, quantum mechanics. I mean, that's better than soap operas and popular music, I find. No, I didn't do very well at that. So that was something I did in the 90s. I went through a phase of just sort of applying for game shows. I can't remember why I got bored at university, I think. But I haven't done anything tremendously recent apart from this, obviously, national fame, exposure.
You know we do a quiz night, right?
Yes, I have heard. What are your subject areas per se?
It varies from quizmaster to quizmaster. We just leave it up to the quizmaster. Sometimes it's general knowledge, sometimes it's music specific. On the 19th, we've got a Christmas quiz.
I don't know much about Christmas, but I'm sure I could dial in for that. I hear it's a thing.
We've got John the Hare on there, he's been on Countdown.
Oh, right.
And we've got Rob McGregor, who's really good at using Google without us knowing.
Yeah, he must be very good in pub quizzes, because the pub quizzes I've done around here, they all do that. On their
phone. So, maybe you could come on and give them a bit of a challenge. Another brain to join us.
To be fair, my knowledge areas are really, really quite specific these days, but yeah.
So what about musically now? What are you up to with the music?
In terms of playing or listening to, or what? I mean, in
terms of you as a player.
As a player, I mean, I mostly try and work out what I can do with my acoustic guitar and finger picking that just sounds good. I play a lot of really folky stuff, and I adapt that style to metal sometimes when I'm feeling in the mood. But it's, I mean, to be fair, okay, let's give you my favourite guitar player in the entire world is a guy called Bert Jansch, who was the guitar player in Pentangle, and he was an amazing folk guitar player in the 60s. And if you listen to his style, it's really jazzy. It's really free. He used to play Yamahas and Martins and have a fantastic tone. And everything he does is just brilliant. And I've always aspired to kind of get towards that place in guitar playing. No plectrums, no amps, just finger picking, beautiful mood, beautiful style, and conveying a sort of the kind of thing you do in folk music, which is a danger and a narrative and a passion that you can just kind of get through there. I mean, it's easy enough to strap on electric and turn the amps up and just whack out power chords. I mean, we've all done it, but I like it when the other end, it's what David Lee Roth said about a good song. It's just one guy in a t-shirt and jeans on a stool under a bare light bulb with an acoustic guitar, and that's what works. That's where I want to go musically. So that's
see, we had this chat the other week. I'm a firm believer that any song that can be boiled down to an acoustic guitar and vocal and keep its integrity is a good song.
Absolutely.
If you can boil it down, you can take all the production away, and it's still a good song with just an acoustic guitar and vocal. Then that's a great song.
Absolutely.
Do you fancy giving us something?
I could certainly have a crack. I happen to have a guitar here.
Just so happened. It wasn't planned whatsoever.
Right, I'm going to play a song. We're talking about a lot about archaeology tonight. This is a song by Simon Friend of the Levellers, which is the only song I'm aware of that I've heard about a Neolithic megalithic structure, and it's called Menantol. So I find myself in the great southwestern hills, running like a madman on the moor. Let the sweet Atlantic rain wash away my ills. The Menantol shone strangely in the storm, and I get the strangest feeling in the air around. It's more than just a feeling, a different way of seeing, a different kind of life, something I believe in. Here amongst the city lights, the feeling's not so clear. Use the signs and neon lights, high but I hold dear. It's there to find if you have the mind and you don't live in fear of it. Testimony remains of all the lives that went before. Lightning strikes the top of Senator. Find myself amazed again, man's pathetic score. Years of knowledge wasted and ignored, and I get the strangest feeling in the air around. More than just a feeling, a different way of seeing, a different kind of life, something I believe in. Here amongst the city lights, the feeling's not so clear. Face the signs and neon lights, high but I hold dear. It's there to find if you have the mind and you don't live in fear of it. Here amongst the city lights, the feeling's not so clear. Face the signs and neon lights, high but I hold dear. It's here to find if you have the mind and you don't live in fear of it.
Yeah.
So I really like that song because it's all about, basically being kind of overawed by essentially archaeology, being out in the landscape and just seeing something powerful and profound and a real connection to it. And, it's a nice, Menantol's a nice monument. If you ever go to Cornwall, it's lovely.
Was that a Simon Friend song on his own or with the Levellers?
No, it was off the Zeitgeist album, so it was off his #1 album. Yay! But it was one he wrote, and I love it. Levellers are one of my favourite bands, and the stuff that Simon Friend does in the Levellers, most of the best songs in the Levellers, I think, are his.
I've met Simon.
Have you?
I have. He done a project called Seismic Survey with Paul Miro, who is a friend of the show and a good friend of mine. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. But they'd done a little gig down in Shepherd's Bush. I think Andy came with me, Mr. Andy Bradley, and we went down there, and they'd done an acoustic set, and we ended up going back afterwards and saying hi and sharing a cigarette. So yes, he's a nice guy. He's a lovely guy.
Yeah. Been a big fan of us for a long, long time.
Aslan says it's ages since you listened to some Levellers, but you know they got some great albums.
They've just had a new album out, and it is pretty damn good.
Have they got a new one out? What's that called?
Yeah, it's just called Peace.
Peace.
Peace, as in peace. You know. It's really good. It's ever since they did Letters in the Underground, they've really been on an absolute belter, and their albums are really, really good.
I'll have to look at that one. I haven't seen that one, so
they're they are a really interesting band as a musician, because they are a sort of self-contained little business. They do all their gigs, all their merch, all their recording, their own studio, their own tour, their own festival, and everything is done by themselves. They haven't been on any label for, God knows, 20 years now, I think. And they do absolutely everything themselves.
They've got their own festival,
really, really
haven't they?
Yeah, Beautiful Days.
Yep.
So it's if you're an independent musician looking for a sort of inspiration on how to actually do it and turn it into not just a successful band, but an actual business, they are really good.
And they're really good on social media as well, especially Matt, the keyboard player, on Twitter. He'll talk to anyone, including me sometimes, you know what I mean?
Crazy fool.
Madness. Total madness. We should get one of them on the show. That would be awesome. So
That'd be amazing. Let's do that.
What other influences have you got? Obviously, you're into your folk, you're into your metal, you're a big Levellers fan, which is kind of does bridge that divide.
The punk folk sort of synergy.
New Model Army?
Yeah, like a bit the Army. I've seen them. They are a most impressive band. I don't know, in terms of one of my favourite bands is Therapy. Absolutely love Therapy. Oh my god, love that band so much. Bands like Fugazi, just, you know, and the independent stuff. My favourite punk band is Discharge, because they're fabulous, except in the 80s when they were really ropey.
I can see why you and Phil get on.
Yeah, if you look, this is my office, right? So this is where I do my stuff. But behind me, that's records. That's just stacks of records that's just tucked away there.
So you're into your vinyl as well?
Yeah. Before my little girl came along, it's quite difficult to play hardcore punk vinyl when there's a 3-year-old running around the room wanting to watch Hey Dougie. But I have a lot of vinyl. It's
a bit like that at Christmas when you want to play some Kevin Bloody Wilson and you've got 2 kids running around. It's like, oh God, come on.
Yeah. I'm waiting till she gets a little bit older. I'm hoping she'll become a punk fan. If not, I've got problems.
Well, you know, it's a good education. You've got to bring them up the right way. That's what it's about.
Absolutely, yeah, this is it.
I was very lucky for a few years with both of mine, and I'd come down and be like, oh, yeah, they're listening to Chris Cornell or Soundgarden or Pearl Jam or something like that. And now I come down and it's beep, bop, beep, beep, dip, bop, but what the hell is that? Do you know what I mean? And it's just, yeah, it's slipped since high school, man.
Yeah, we've got a lot of Baby Shark going in this household, so hopefully that will not
Fun fact, Baby Shark was the first thing I asked for, the first thing I actually even said when I dropped into one of Phil's live shows on a Friday.
Oh, really?
We talked about it on the Thursday.
Yeah.
I dropped into his show on the Friday, requested Baby Shark. He played it really slow and sad, and then his stream crashed.
Oh.
True story.
He does break strings so bad. He's just too harsh. He thrashes everything. His go-to style is just thrash. It's like, dude, calm down, let the songs breathe. No. Okay.
So, are you a writer? Do you write songs?
Oh, I'm not. I have written songs. They're mostly very angry. I mean, I could play you one if you want, but I haven't written much for a while. I still write a lot more, but I prefer playing other people's songs, to be honest.
You say they're very angry, but you've already told us your influences are the Levellers and Therapy and Fugazi and punk.
I'm not that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I can play you one if you like.
You can play one, yeah. Go on, why not?
Shall I play one?
We've got plenty of time. It's all good. Let's have some music.
Why not? Let's play a song that I wrote. I remember which flipping capo it was.
over to you then.
Right, so this song, a long time ago, started being about UKIP, and it's pretty much more about Brexit now. You take this flag, wrap it around your body. Keeps out everyone who doesn't look and think like you. History's written by the winners, at least the version that you subscribe to. There's more power in a union than the likes of you can know. So guard the shores, all you racist boys, your island is too small to go. And you claim it as your own. No born of centuries of migrants we all are. And the language that you claim is yours to speak, born of words from overseas, near and far. There's more power in a union than the likes of you can know. The shores, all you racist boys, your island is too small to grow. Your nationalism, it is meaningless to me. My race is human, not some tribal polity with an empire dead and gone, long lost to history. Thankfully, most of us have moved on. Most of us have moved on. Hate-filled voice echoes around my neighborhood, and the bigots flock to your banner and your creed. Just as ignorance and the violence of the mob, but it won't get you to the power that you need. Oh, no indeed, 'cause there's more power in a union than the likes of you can know. So guard the shores, all you racist boys, your island is too small to grow. Guard the shores, all you racist boys, your island is too small to grow.
Very nice.
So, you know, as you can see, I'm not one of these leavers. You know, that's one of those songs that I wrote years ago when UKIP were just doing my head in and they were like a big thing. And it's now even more relevant because it's all about the Brexit developments.
So
anyway.
I take it you're not up for where we've gone down with
Yeah,
this?
not massively. Being something of a student of human culture, history, and that sort of business, it's all a bit.
But being
silly,
as a
really.
student, you weren't in for an oven-ready meal.
No, no, it wasn't ever right. There was no bloody oven, no meal. I mean, it's just like he's dropped all the ingredients on the floor, set fire to them, and walked away. That's not a meal. That's a culinary disaster. You know, if you'd do that at Christmas, it'd be a terrible idea. So yeah, so that's
to be honest, I didn't vote either way because I saw it going like this. I didn't see what anyone was voting for was what was going to be delivered, basically. So I thought, you know, I'll sit back and watch the developments, and car crash. But anyway.
So there it
let's
is.
get back to the history. If we're going to go controversial,
Rightio.
all right, let's talk a bit more about history because you know I mentioned to you that I'm a big fan of a lot of all of this, and I love a lot of the ancient history. And I came from a Catholic background and kind of denounced that, and kind of went on a mission to learn stuff. And I learnt a lot about different religions, and I learnt a lot about history, and I've done a bit of anthropology, and just lots of different stuff, you know. And some of the stuff that I really, really like is the alternate history or fringe science of history. So, with an expert in the house, maybe we can get some answers.
Okay, we can certainly try.
So, do you know Graham Hancock?
I do, yes.
Have you read his stuff?
I've read a couple of books years ago. I mean, yes, he's one of those guys that some of his ideas are actually quite sensible, and some of them just sort of go off into the ether. The problem with a lot of writers like him is that, coming from a background of academia, where I've worked for many, many years, we have this thing called peer review, this idea that if you publish something, it gets published because people look at it, edit it, check it, and make sure it's okay, and then it only goes out if it's subject to that process. When you're writing popular books, when you're just dealing with a single publisher, the input is less. So you're basically dealing with your own ideas and developing in isolation. So people like him, you get these ideas developed in a bit of a vacuum, where there's not a lot of input from the wider academic community or academic consensus or other sorts of things. It's very much his ideas that have been developed there. And some of them are interesting. The way he deals with, for example, the alignments of the pyramids and the association with the stellar cult in the Old Kingdom, that sort of thing. There's some sensible ideas there, but I find the problem with those popular books is that they don't have the sort of the grounding in reality that you get in academia, where everything is very much checked, fact-checked, and constantly subject to peer review. And that's the basic underpinnings of science and academia in this world. So, you take a pinch of it, but you have to be a bit sceptical, I think.
I totally agree that you have to be sceptical, and also along with a lot of the facts in a lot of these books, there is fact, but there's also speculation.
No, absolutely.
They also speculate on those facts and how they fit into the puzzle, like we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
But I think the interesting thing is, as we've said, we've moved on a lot in technology, genetics, radar, and everything like that, and we're finding out a hell of a lot more now about cities in the Amazon that we didn't know existed.
Yeah, that's true.
The population of that being triple of what we thought it was.
One of the guys I used to work at the University of Reading, actually, his entire thing is looking at the Amazon basin and doing paleoecology, and basically the whole Amazon basin is actually an artificial landscape, because it's the product of centuries of the sort of small scale garden agriculture that was going on at the time, and it really transformed all the soils and all the way the trees are up and so forth. It's a less natural landscape than you might think. And the LiDAR surveys have revealed all these big platforms and settlements actually in the Amazon basin that have not been settled for 1,000 years, but they're still there.
And they were effectively farming the forest, weren't they?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And almost sort of bioengineering their environment.
Absolutely. Yeah, you get
by cutting trenches and irrigation.
You're getting dangerously close to soil science here. I'm going to start talking about Terra Plata, the deep black soils of the Amazon that are all actually created by human interactions over thousands of years. Yeah, it's the whole landscape is not natural, and most landscapes on this planet actually aren't natural when it comes down to it. There isn't any landscape in this country that's natural. It's all artificially created.
Do you think that potentially some of these ancient civilizations, some that we might not even have found yet, were potentially technologically advanced in a way that we don't understand? I'm not talking flying machines and combustion engines.
The difficulty is, what you're talking about is a material culture that is something that we've never encountered in any of the archaeological records, but by its nature would be such that it would have to leave traces that we would have found. It's something that I guess in other circumstances Richard Dawkins would talk about, the idea that it's an extraordinary claim requires extraordinary proof.
Yes.
So yes, in archaeology we are constantly finding areas or little cultures where things are really interesting and happening in a way that we didn't quite understand before, that are happening earlier than we thought, but they're quite localized. You're not talking like big planet-wide things. You're talking about certain specific Mesoamerican or pre-Egyptian or precursor Middle Eastern cultures where certain things are happening. You think, oh, that's really good. Back 8,000 BC, they were doing things that we didn't think they were doing quite then. They push the timescales back for certain technologies, but it's happening at a localized level. We're not seeing evidence of there being some sort of precursor civilization, sort of in the Atlantis model, where everybody rocked up with chariots and computers and diodes and things 1,000 years before they'd perfected pottery in the Near East. We have no evidence of that at all. And I think it's fair to say that by now there will be definitely something that we would have seen that would have changed the model in which we understand how civilization developed, which in this part of the world fundamentally begins with the Sumerians and the Egyptians.
But I mean, if you look back through the legends and the religious stories of these people that we've translated from temple walls and all that sort of good stuff, there's a lot of stories that claim that their gods were gods on earth. They weren't up in the stars, they weren't up in the heavens. Now, obviously, you've got the people like Eric von Daniken, who I know you have no time for, who proposes they were aliens.
Yeah, no.
But Hancock goes down the line of that these were humans. These were people from a precursor civilization. He likes to use the word Atlantis. Sure. I don't.
Okay. The fundamental fallacy about that is a lot of oral traditions and mythologies are based in a very down-to-earth idea that your gods are your ancestors. Coming from the cultural background that I come from, early medieval England, Anglo-Saxon cultural background, if you look at the king lists of the heptarchy, the ancient Anglo-Saxon kingdoms of Kent, of Sussex, of Wessex, they trace the genealogy of their rulers back to Woden or Odin, Allfather, Old One Eye, Spear Shaker, whose name is Frenzy, him of 1,000 days, same guy. And actually, if you look at the documents, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which is our big thing, the documents that sort of thing bases around trace the antecedents back to gods, and that's because they were looking to legitimise their political households. And if you said, Kinnereth, my king, he traces his ancestry back to Woden, is his great-great-granddad. He was like, oh my God, that means he must be amazing. We're going to be in his field and carry our spears and fight the Danes for him. It's a really basic human principle when you come to those kinds of religions, that you ground those religions in concepts of patriarchy and hereditary and the genealogies of your royal household. So you make your royals something greater than just a guy with a massive beard and a slightly sharper axe. You take you take it into the realms of deities. I mean, people like the Egyptians did this to a ridiculous extent because their gods were literally the pharaohs were the living gods. But the cultures closer to home, same thing, and we have records of this, and it's a universal human thing of tracing the patriarchy back to gods.
And another one of Hancock's prepositions, which I'd like your thoughts on, was that, and I'm boiling down a whole book into a sentence here, that pretty much gods came about through people tripping off their tits by taking ayahuasca and dancing through dehydration and stuff like that. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Were gods just a trip?
I mean, when it comes right down to it, as a cynical atheist, I would definitely say that the gods are basically people filling in gaps in their understanding. So they don't understand it. They look at the sky. They see, they hear thunder. They see lightning. They don't understand the mechanisms of, static electricity and friction and polarity and physics and sort of electromagnetism. But they see a guy with a massive hammer throwing it down and causing a lot of trouble with his goats and his chariot riding across the sky. It's stories that are used to fill in gaps in understanding. And at a basic level, it comes down to people really wanting to know about the world they live in and understand how it functions. And in a world where concepts of the scientific methodology and the idea that you have hypothesis, antithesis, and synthesis, and the idea that you propose theories and prove them, or rather disprove them, which is the way science actually works. If you don't have that, then it's about who has the most convincing story. And if you're in a world where the only people you know are your tribe and your animals and the environment around you, you contextualize everything in the form of animals and your big man, leader of the tribe, and those sorts of ideas. And that's where fundamentally all the gods come from at a basic level. It's about seeking understanding in a human context. People created gods in their own image, essentially.
Thus the sun being one of the main gods in most cultures.
Yeah. Because the sun is a great big hot thing that's in the sky. It dominates life, it dominates seasonality, it dominates your day and night cycle of activities. It becomes the obvious god. It's one of the most pernicious sort of little deities from the Egyptian Aten, which is the deification of the sun god, all the way through to your basic animistic totemic worship of the sun as a big blazing disc.
Yeah, it was used in a lot of cultures.
A lot of cultures, yeah, absolutely.
And how do you feel about ooparts? Do you know about ooparts?
Ooparts?
Anomalies in the fossil record. So, for example, we've got the Baghdad battery, which is a pot which basically would work as a battery
which
well predates electricity. And
things like
the
Antikythera mechanism.
Antikythera mechanism. Yeah.
Antikythera, yes, absolutely. I'm not sure they on their own are sufficient to overturn our understanding of things. I mean, the Antikythera mechanism is a really, really elaborate mechanical calendar. It models the motion of the stars and so forth. As for the battery thing, I mean, to get a battery, you need two metals and some acid. It's not, I mean, it really isn't rocket science. It's the kind of thing that people are experimenting with electricity through the tradition of alchemy and all the sort of pre-scientific things in the Western world. It has a long history of people doing crazy things with chemicals and metals to try and create phlogiston or the philosopher's stone and things like that, and immortalize. So it goes back to sort of pre-scientific traditions in a number of cultures. I don't think it overturns our fundamental understanding of how things actually developed, because they may not have viewed their pot with metals and acids in the same way that we might look at that and think, well, actually that generates a charge, you can power a clock off it. But they might have looked at it and said, and as a kind of thing where if they touch the terminals, they get a tingle, and that's they're in touch with the spirit. So it's interpretation, it's contextualization. What are they actually doing with that stuff? What is it for, and how are they understanding it? Because our understanding of it and their understanding of it are not the same. So.
I think that's a really interesting thought. I mean, yeah, I like that. The fact that it could be used for a religious thing purely through getting a tingle.
Electricity was used as a medical thing in the Victorian period. They used it to try and cure hysteria and cure all sorts of mental disorders. You attach yourself to a battery and have at it.
And revved it up,
absolutely. Before we understood what it was and what it could do, like in a power light bulb or whatever. The fact that it was a force that was recognised and had a physiological effect meant people did things with it, and they understood it in different ways.
So, Stonehenge, my favourite monument in Britain. It's an amazing place, and whether you believe in any of it or not, it has got an area of...
Well, I believe in Stonehenge. I believe it's a thing. I've been there. I've seen it.
So what's your thoughts on this? Again, I've done a few online studies on this.
In what sense?
In the context, I mean, the big question: what is it?
What is it? It's a bit of a contradiction in terms. It's a henge monument that's not actually a henge, because a henge has the ditch on the inside and the bank on the outside, and Stonehenge. Anyway, so basically, it's the type site for a kind of monument that actually isn't very demonstrative of that kind of. As a field archaeologist, that's something I'd point out. In terms of what it actually was for, it's a religious focus, a social focus. It has applications with the calendar and plotting the seasons. It's, I guess, what we might call a bit of a sort of central place as a focus for activity, and it's very difficult to understand the nature of that activity because it was not something that's been recorded. So you can look at the bare bones and the structure. I mean, it's trying to, I don't know, it's like trying to rewrite the New Testament by looking at the nave plan of Salisbury Cathedral, okay? You see there's a cruciform, you see there's an aisles, you see there's various structures in there, but you can't reconstruct the narrative of the apostles based upon the position of the pillars in the nave of Salisbury Cathedral. In the same way, you look at Stonehenge, and just by looking at the trilithons and the blue stones and the various ways it's arranged, you can't possibly hope to reconstruct the things that went into that creation, because it's so far beyond what we can achieve. As archaeologists, there's only so far you can go with how you reconstruct things. There's always a question of, well, we know it did certain things and it was built in this way. We can reconstruct how it's built, where the materials come from, the alignments of the stones. We can make suppositions about the people who put the thing together. But in terms of the actual, the sort of sociological, mythological construct behind it, you can't. You really can't. And actually, it's kind of crazy to try, because you're never ever going to be able to get there. All you're doing is superimposing modern ideas on an ancient structure.
Because most people don't understand that Stonehenge was built over the course of 1,000 years,
yeah,
which is about 300 generations,
correct.
roughly.
What you've got, the final phase of Stonehenge, which is approximately contemporary with the Great Pyramid of Giza, about 800 BC, is the end of a really long sequence of things that goes right back into the Mesolithic. So we're talking 7,000 BC. If you go down to a place called Blickmead, which is just near Stonehenge, there's activities associated with the Mesolithic people, the hunter-gatherer precursors to the people who built Stonehenge, and it's a really ancient landscape with all sorts of things going on over an extremely long period of time. And the chances are the belief systems that generated the various phases were not continuous anyway. They changed over time, and people recognised ancient structures of their ancestors and incorporated them into their later circumstances. It's in the same way, some churches are built on pagan burial mounds and Anglo-Saxon mooting places, which themselves are associated with Bronze Age burial mounds. It's the appropriation of sacred spaces in a continuation. And you look back and think, oh, that must mean a continuous religion, but it's not. It's just different belief systems that just happen to use the same spaces because they're trying to create a sense of legitimacy over time, by appropriating these ancient spaces.
Because obviously they started off with Stonehenge, but a wolf came along, blew that down.
Yeah, and then
Woodhenge.
And Brickhenge, maybe. Actually, to be fair, there is a Woodhenge. There is a site
There was a
called
Woodhenge, yes.
Which was built with massive great timber posts. And earlier phases of those megalithic structures are often associated with big timber settings, which is something that's actually only relatively recently coming to light. And the landscape around Stonehenge, they've recently found huge alignments of massive pits that were, in the landscape long before Stonehenge was a thing, defining sacred spaces and areas and things. So once you have those things in a more permanent structure like the stone, all you see is the stone. You forget about the stuff that came before.
Yeah, because I've got the walls, what are they called?
Durrington walls.
Durrington walls,
which
they've been digging up.
Massive henge one. Yeah, and also has a settlement next to it, which is supposed to be a settlement of people who are associated with some of the monuments in the Neolithic landscape of Wessex. I mean, it's a whole area is absolutely incredible.
And obviously you've got Avebury just up the road as well, which is another lovely place to visit.
It is, and it's older. It's an older site.
By about 300 years, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the central bit of Avebury, the Cove, as they used to call it, is an older structure. And there is this idea that these monuments, there's a sort of a sequence of them across the landscape, but in truth we don't really know. We are making suppositions based on our modern understandings, but we can look at how it was built, we can look at how it was laid out and how it's put together, but trying to understand the meaning behind it is kind of a fool's errand, really, because you can't really get to that as an archaeologist.
It's all guesswork, for the most part.
To some degree.
When we talk about
some
usage,
aspects.
when we talk about usage,
you can, as archaeologists, we uncover the material aspects. We can reconstruct the material bits and pieces, the things they left behind, how stuff was put together, and what they were doing to a certain degree. The meaning behind it, no. And a lot of people do try and jump that cultural divide, but it's a bit dangerous, to be honest, because you are inviting crazy speculation and fringe theories which don't really make a lot of sense in the cold light of day.
But I think this is something in understanding. We're starting to work out that other sites across the world are potentially built on older sites, and older sites built on even older sites, because we repurpose places. If it's built in a good area, we'll reuse the area.
Same attractions, motivate people throughout generations. If somebody thought something was a sacred space, then 2 generations down the line, they still think it's a sacred space for the same reasons. It's got a nice view. It's got a nice spring. There's something about it which gives you the sort of the heebie-jeebies. You can see the stars from there. There's all sorts of different reasons why people would choose physical places in the landscape and turn them into sacred spaces.
Very much like modern-day churches were built on hills, so they could look down on the congregation that they were serving.
Yeah, and a lot of the time that's because they're built on older sites that were built for the same reason.
Yeah, well, that's what the Romans did, didn't they? They basically came in and nicked all the pagan festivals and said, just do Jesus instead of Woden.
Happy Saturnalia, by the way.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Or Yule.
Or Yule, absolutely.
I mean, in fact, do you know what? Since you're on, I've got a song called Happy Winter Solstice, which I wrote a while ago, which is all history.
Excellent.
So I'll play out with that, because I'm trying to play out with the Christmas song. It's
Marvellous.
not that Christmas, but... one more thing. We'll have a quick one. Göbekli Tepe, which is another one of my favourites at the moment. This is a monument. We've dug up about 1/10 of it in Turkey, is it?
Yeah, yes. So for those of your listeners who are not familiar with Anatolian early Holocene archaeology, it's a site that dates to something crazy like 10,000 BC, which is right at the start of the period we call the Holocene, which is all the post-Ice Age stuff, when the ice sheets were thinning, people started doing their thing again. And it dates to a time when they weren't even using pottery. It's a really basic cultural setup that we understand, but they're putting there these massive megalithic structures with carvings and all sorts of things. And it does fly in the face of a little bit of conventional understanding. I mean, it does tie into wider understanding like Çatalhöyük and sites which were doing a lot of interesting things early on. And there was some crazy stuff happening in that part of the world. But yeah, we do find sites like that which push the boundaries back for certain things like big stone carvings and megalithic sculptures and so forth.
How do we, there was an article recently which potentially pushes back our species, Homo sapiens, to 300,000 years, and from the west of Africa, not the east of Africa like we originally thought. How do we explain this? 292,000 years, and potentially, and then we start building stuff.
Right.
What's happening in that 292,000 years? Is this not a possibility that somewhere down the line, someone else had the same ideas that they did that further down the line?
It's a long-standing question in archaeology, what propagates things like the agricultural revolution, where people start planting crops and growing things as opposed to just sticking spears in animals. And to be honest, a lot of it probably comes down to pressures on the society of the time from things like disease and climate change. So in the circumstances of the early Holocene, when you've got this pronounced climate change and the ice sheets recede and all the landscape changes, people are suddenly find that the ways that they used to do things is no longer tenable because you've got sudden, rapid climate change. So they learn new skills, they move to new places, they adapt and they survive. And this is what people have always done. And sometimes you get points where the pressures on the environment mean that the old ways of doing things just don't work anymore. The game isn't there anymore. The water supplies aren't there anymore. The climate change is too hot, it's too dry, whatever. So people have to adapt. And you get responses to those selective adaptative pressures, which include things like growing crops, which include things like building more social structure, which necessitates bigger settlements, which again relies upon an agricultural base or an increased raft of resources you can draw upon. And often, I mean, don't get into functional determinism here, but it does come down to there being external driving forces which push people into doing new things. And there have been points in our history where you look at genetics and people have reached bottlenecks where we were almost extinct. There's only a few thousand members of the species left for whatever reason, and they're diversified again, and off they go and they go out to the world. So clearly the species suffers fluctuations over the centuries, and some of those fluctuations result in profound changes to the way we do things. And it just comes down to things, really basic aspects of how we survive as a species.
So do you think we're going to see more and more now this getting pushed back? Do you think we can go back much further with the sort of civilization and bits and pieces?
It depends how you define civilization. In the Göbekli Tepe school of things, you're talking about a society that doesn't really have agriculture, doesn't really have pottery, but they are coming together and building big structures. And,
massive structures.
Massive structures. So some aspects of what we look for in a civilization there, but it's not like an ancient civilization that's just 10,000 years before Rome. It's not quite how it works. You have to, again, we're looking at the structures through modern eyes, and we're interpreting them through a modern worldview, and we're saying, there's a great load of stones, this must be a central settlement, or it can't be anything else. And that's actually not really the case. You have, you can look at other parts of the world, in Africa, for example, like Great Zimbabwe, the monument after which the country of Zimbabwe is named, which is this absolutely colossal set of stone structures in Africa. And the society that built it didn't really leave much in the way of other monuments, and it's poorly understood. But they came together to build this massive great centre that's like a royal centre of power, because they wanted something to monumentalise their power structures. And it's not the same as looking at a big Western city and going, a big city surrounded by lots of villages, surrounded by lots of religious and other sorts of bits and pieces. You're looking at it through a very Western-centric perspective, and it's a little bit more complicated than that, frankly. And when we uncover these sort of settlements, we do have to, monuments do have to understand where they're coming from in terms of the society that produced them, in terms of how we understand what they were for.
I think that's something we do a lot as humans. We look at everything from a Western perspective.
Absolutely.
It's just certainly us.
It's a horrible flaw, frankly.
Yeah, you will have democracy because we say you should have democracy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though you don't want democracy because it's not been a part of your culture for 3,000 years.
No,
Anyway, that's another debate for another time.
It really is.
It sounds like we could have that. Simon, it's 10 past 10. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
I've probably bored your listeners absolutely witless by now. Are there any left?
Do you know what? They're chatting away in the chat room. It's all good.
All three of them.
We have 24 watching right now.
24? Amazing.
So it's all good. And that's good for a Monday night. But, it's nice to do something different. It's nice to take a break from just full-on music all the time and get a feel for other things that are going on in the world.
Absolutely.
And I'm just a bit of a nerd.
You're playing to the choir here, though, I think.
So, is there anywhere that if people want to find out more about you or your music or what you do?
Well, in terms of what I do, I mean, the British Museum's finds.org.uk website, which is the website of the Portable Antiquity Scheme, which is the organisation for which I work. That has our database, which has 1.5 million objects on it. It's the biggest database of its kind on the planet for publicly recorded archaeology. And it's just a big database of all the things that people find, that we tell them what they are and record them. And it has my contact details on if you happen to find a gold hoard and you've recorded.
I've just had a text message from Mark Chudley. Said that was effing fabulous. Thank you, Simon.
Excellent.
Delwyn in the chat room saying, Dr. Simon every week, please.
I'm here on Thursday, 8:15.
Wicked. Come and play some tunes. But man, this is what I want to do. I want to talk to people more about other stuff, and I find what you do fascinating. I found the whole history of mankind fascinating. So someone who can sit there and talk about it with knowledge and proper education in it.
Right, thank you.
Rather than be one of those YouTube channels that says we found Atlantis in the back of someone's toilet.
The scheme I work for is part of a national thing which has access to academics and museum experts. So if I find something that I come across, I don't know what it is, I can spread it around a network of people and get lots of input. It's not just me shouting in the dark. We're part of a collective research initiative, a community of people all across the country. There are 40 people in the country who do my job, and we have access to hundreds of academics and researchers across the planet, and we're embedded very much in that network. So it's all about, we're not just coming up with an opinion saying, right, this is what this is. It's one of these. Everything gets fact-checked. Everything gets sense-checked. It's all very scientific insofar as you can make belt buckles and coins and jetons and Roman brooches scientific. But we do try, so that's kind of what we do.
So anything that we should bury for archaeologists of the future?
Well, we've got to the point now where the amount of synthetic materials in the world exceeds the mass of the biosphere, and they've announced an entirely new geological epoch. The Anthropocene, which is I'm a geoarchaeologist by training, so there's a very sort of nerdy route here, but if you're actually changing the geological epoch, that means there is a stratum now in the lithosphere which is found throughout the world, which can define a boundary point above which it's an entirely new epoch, which means there is so much plastic crap now in the lithosphere that anywhere you go there is going to be a seam which says people. And so we're doing that already. We don't have to bury anything else. We've done quite a lot of that, I think.
Because we can do that obviously with volcanoes. We can do that with meteoroid strikes.
Well, the volcanoes are actually the thing you can't do, because volcanoes are a regenerative process. The point of a volcano is it wells up magma, creating new strata on the planet. It's the point of the planet where everything is the youngest. So if you want to go somewhere like the central crust of Australia, the craton of Australia, the landscape hasn't changed in like hundreds and hundreds of millions of years because it's miles away from an active tectonic fault line. If you want to have some stable, burial time capsules and things. Sticking a volcano, that's not going to work. It's just getting melted.
No, but we can see how the movement of history through the strata of the Earth. So we can see layers of volcano. We can see layers of meteoric glass in certain areas that spread across large parts of the world where we've had meteorite strikes.
That's geology, not history. But yes, it's the same sort of idea. But
you identify those strata, don't you? You can age things by counting the rings of the planet, basically.
Well, it's all due to radiometric dating, which is the basic principle under which all this is pinned. Everything from radiocarbon dating back to uranium, thorium series dating. So it all depends on isotopes, and isotopes are radioactively unstable, and they have half-lives, which means that the quantity of the isotope decays by 50% over a unit period of time. In the case of radiocarbon dating, it's about 5,000 years, I think. So essentially, if you get a sample of whichever isotope you're trying to date from, and you work out how much the isotope is there in proportion to the rest of the unradioactive part of the element, you can date it. And we use this basic principle from everything from organic materials and archaeology down to dating trace elements of zircons in the rocks of Australia back to the very beginning, 4.5 billion years ago on the planet. So, in fact, actually, I've got a thing up here, a bit of show and tell, which I didn't bring out earlier. If you're into your geology, the lines on that rock are caused by algae that were growing around, very, very dawn of life, like 2.5 billion years ago, in the Precambrian, and that's a thing called So stromatolites.
Amazing.
It's a slice of a stromatolite, which is a big sort of lumpy thing. You see them around places like Shark Bay in Australia, and they look kind of weird. And what they are is they're basically algae and eukaryotic bacteria. Actually, not algae, they're bacteria, but they're photosynthetic bacteria that create layers over time, and they create these big rocks. And that is a fossil one. So that is the oldest evidence for life that you're pretty much ever going to see on this planet, because those lines are created by single-celled organisms from the time when the atmosphere was toxic, there was no oxygen, and there was nothing apart from slime and ooze.
Ooh.
But, you can find it in the rocks. So yeah.
Sounds like a fun place to be for a weekend, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
I've drunk in a few pubs like that. Mate, it is fascinating, and I think we might do this again at some point in time, because literally we could talk for hours on this.
It probably could do, actually, and I have lots of songs. So.
Look, thank you so much for coming on. Thanks to everyone for bearing with us, because we did get a bit nerdy, but I think people have enjoyed it, and that's the main thing. And, this is what the show's all about, finding new things to talk about besides music. I'm going to play you out with an 8th Month Malfunction track called Happy Winter Solstice. But before I do, forgotten the plugs. Don't forget we got the Jam Night on Thursday. Simon's going to be there.
I am.
8:15, is it?
8:15, as I recall, yeah.
Come and play us a couple of songs. We have got the Christmas quiz on Saturday, and Cindy is hosting that, and it's going to be a quiz all about Christmas, because, that's what we're doing. On the 21st, we are doing a Meet the Freaks next week with Santa Claus, ladies and gentlemen. Santa Claus is going to be here. He's going to join us. We're going to play some Christmas music, and we're going to have a chat with Santa and see if we can get him drunk. And it's just going to be a bit of fun. And then obviously on the 23rd, not the 24th, on the 23rd is the Christmas Jam Night, and I do believe that's pretty booked up. I might have one slot available if anyone's missing.
Well, on your website, it says it's on the 24th.
It does. The booking's on the 24th, but the actual post is the 23rd. We couldn't change it because I didn't want to do Christmas Eve because we've got kids and stuff,
Right.
So we're going to do it on the 23rd. Are you changing your
I am just
calendar?
I'm just booking myself in for that slot.
8:45 is the free one. I've got a free one at 8:45. If
2015, apparently, according to your website.
Okay, there's another one. I've just had one free up. That's why. I'll sort it out.
Right.
I'll have a look at that in a minute. And yeah, we've just got loads of Christmas stuff. I'm going to be doing a Zoom chat tomorrow, 1 till 2 for a lunchtime chat. If you want to get involved, we're doing a lunchtime request show on Wednesday at 12 till 1. If you want to come in for that, and if you want to support the show, go and buy some merch from freakjam.b4branded.co.uk or buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.radio.com/Radio Freakjam. All this stuff I've got to remember, man. It's just too much. We're going to play out with this, Simon. Say goodbye to everyone.
Goodbye to everyone.
We'll see you Thursday. This is a happy winter solstice, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
Let's gather round the Christmas tree, the pagan sacrificial tree, where they used to kill kids to appease the mother earth. Let's kiss under the mistletoe, the poison of the druid show, and the kiss can be linked to sexual depravity. What do you see? What do you see? Under the Christian veneer they expect us to believe. Let's feast upon the festive food like the Romans made the Jewish do before they chased them in the streets to beat them half to death. Let's eat like a chocolate cheer, a symbol of the shortest day of the year, where if the fires went out, you could die in the winter's freeze. What do you see? solstice. Happy pagan festival. Happy Saturnalia. Oh, happy you. Happy winter solstice. Happy pagan festival. Happy Saturnalia. Oh, happy you. It was easy for the judge to see that the symbols could remain the same as long as we got drunk in the name of baby Jesus. There's no Christmas trees in Bethlehem, and the presents weren't from three wise men. They're a symbol of the tax to the aristocracy. Let's hear it for the holly tree, lives through winter, evergreen. That was cleaned by the church today where Jesus walked. Saint Nick, we know Santa Claus, some truth in religion, here of course. That was painted copper red on the rock and roll Cold Wars. What do you see? What do you see? Under the Christian belief, they expect us to believe. What do you see? The breed is still an important day. Tradition observed by ancient man way before Christ. Happy winter solstice. Happy pagan festival. Happy Saturnalia. Oh, happy you. Happy winter solstice. Happy pagan festival. Happy Saturnalia. Oh, happy you. Happy winter solstice. Happy pagan festival. Happy Saturnalia. Oh, happy you. Happy winter solstice. Happy pagan festival. Happy Saturnalia.